In almost every business, pricing follows a simple, universal equation. You take your cost of production, add a reasonable profit margin, and that gives you your selling price. But for the Indian farmer, this equation breaks down. They are the only entrepreneurs who have absolutely zero power to set the price of their own product. They are entirely price takers. State intervention in the 1960s was born of necessity. By establishing price controls and rationing, India moved from a chronically food-scarce nation to a net agricultural exporter. Yet the primary producers behind that massive surplus are currently trapped in an economic crisis. This disconnect between national abundance and individual poverty is what drove millions of farmers to organize massive national protests demanding guaranteed prices for their crops. A three-layered structural vice strips away the farmer's negotiating power before the seeds are even planted, making break-even prices nearly impossible to achieve, regardless of yield or effort. The first layer of this trap is physical. Most Indian farmers own less than 2 hectares of land and cultivate highly perishable crops. Without access to cold storage, they race against a biological clock starting the moment they harvest. That ticking clock forces them into the local APMC Mandi, or wholesale market. While meant to ensure fair trade, these markets are often cartelized spaces where a handful of licensed commission agents, known as arhatiyas, control the bidding. Because the farmer cannot afford to transport rotting produce back home, they must accept whatever price is offered. In Tamil Nadu, corporate buyers recently formed a syndicate to intentionally crash procurement prices for copra, leaving coconut farmers with no choice but to sell at a loss. This is compounded by debt. Many farmers rely on these same local middlemen for pre-harvest loans for seeds and fertilizer. When the harvest comes in, the farmer cannot negotiate. They must surrender the crop to clear the debt. At the ground level, farmers are not participating in a free, competitive auction. They are hostages to localized cartels and immediate financial desperation. If local markets are failing, the question becomes why the national government doesn't protect the farmer using the famous minimum support price, or MSP. The MSP is an officially announced floor price meant to guarantee a profitable return. In reality, the MSP is largely a phantom number. Announcing a price on paper does nothing unless state agencies physically enter the market to buy the crop at that rate. This map shows the reality of government purchasing. Physical procurement is overwhelmingly concentrated on just 2 crops, wheat and paddy, in a few specific states. If you grow commercial crops or live in the southern or eastern states, you are abandoned to private buyers. This uneven safety net is driven by a systemic consumer bias. Politicians prioritize keeping food inflation low for urban voters over ensuring high profits for rural producers. This bias is executed through blunt macroeconomic tools. The moment a domestic crop, like onions, becomes globally profitable, the state frequently imposes sudden export bans or stock limits to intentionally crush the farm gate price and cool the urban market. This policy architecture acts as an invisible tax on the rural producer to subsidize the urban consumer, making rural capital accumulation nearly impossible. If domestic policy is failing, why doesn't India simply pass a law making the MSP a legal guarantee for all 23 mandated crops? The answer lies at the World Trade Organization in Geneva. Under the WTO, trade-distorting support falls into the amber box. Developing nations like India are strictly capped at 10% of agricultural production value, but this math is rigged by an antiquated 1986 reference price. Ignoring decades of inflation, India's spending instantly breaches this ceiling. To avoid crippling trade sanctions from wealthier nations, India is forced to rely on temporary peace clauses. These provisional agreements are the only thing protecting its food security programs from international litigation. International trade law acts as an immovable geopolitical ceiling. The WTO legally prohibits India from infinitely buying its way out of its domestic agricultural failures. The WTO does not force the local middleman to be corrupt, nor does it mandate domestic export bans. It simply blocks the easiest political fix. Breaking the local trap requires physical solutions. Farmers need scientific cold storage and packhouses to eliminate the biological ticking clock of perishability. Secure storage allows for warehouse receipt financing. If a farmer can deposit their harvest and receive a secure electronic receipt, they can obtain a bank loan using that receipt as collateral. This lets them bypass the local moneylender and wait for peak market prices. Localized models are already bypassing the Mandi cartel. In Tamil Nadu, Ulavar Sandai markets and the Ulavan app connect farmers directly to consumers and real-time market data, eliminating wholesale middlemen and the fees they extract. Shifting a farmer from a price taker to a price setter means giving them the physical and financial logistics required to simply walk away from a bad deal. This leaves the final barrier, the WTO ceiling. There is still a way for the government to support farmers financially without breaching the restricted amber box. The loophole is green box compliance. Direct cash transfers, which provide liquidity to rural households without being tied to specific crop production, are entirely exempt from WTO limits. Resolving the agrarian crisis will not be achieved by shouting at international trade bodies or passing statutory price declarations on paper that are ignored in the village markets. True agricultural sovereignty requires dismantling local cartels and building physical infrastructure. Fair prices are built from the ground up, not decreed from the top down.